You know the egregious theft that's been happening at my stores. The boosters take my clothes because they're low-class urban bitches.
Chrissy Smith knows we exist.
Welcome back for another movie review. This time we're talking about Boots Riley's latest, I Love Boosters, and I do have to say I was not expecting it to get as weird and over the top as it does. I never had a chance to get around to seeing Sorry to Bother You. Definitely need to rectify that and go see that sometime. I did hear that movie gets a little out there, a little outlandish, and kind of tackles a number of different genres. And you could say the same thing for I Love Boosters, which stars Keke Palmer as Corvette, who leads this gang of boosters or shoplifters who are going after this billionaire maven who is trying to own everything in the fashion industry and just take total control of that particular segment of, I guess, capitalism. We'll say capitalism. There's a lot of anti-capitalist stuff in this one. But Corvette and her crew, you have Taylor Page, Naomi Ackie, Lakeith Stanfield's in here, although I do have a really big issue with the character he plays, mainly because he's kind of useless. You also have Demi Moore as Chrissy Smith, who's the billionaire maven of fashion who is trying to take down the boosters. And then you have Don Cheadle, Will Poulter, and there's a bunch of other people in this movie that pop up here and there for really small cameo roles. There's just a lot going on here. And I think the overall direction is the strongest point of this movie, is because Boots Riley has a very inventive way of shooting different types of scenes. There's a great use of color in this film, especially in some of these design stores that they work at and are boosting from. And there's a lot of different types of filmmaking presented in here, from some interesting uses of stop motion. There's also this aesthetic that makes it almost feel like a, I don't know, cardboard cutout. It feels like some kind of craft work that's going on, cutting out newspapers and putting on poster board. There's some scenes that really feel like that, but at a more deliberate and refined look of it. So it's interesting, it's wacky, it goes places you don't think it's gonna go, or even consider it going with the story that's trying to be told here. It is just very inventive and clever with how he does the visuals and mixes all these different concepts. If I would have to compare it to, just because I haven't seen his previous work, I would have to say there's a lot of inspiration from Wes Anderson. There's like Wes Anderson vibes here, but if Wes Anderson wasn't restrained, I would say, because it goes a little bit crazier and more absurd than what Wes Anderson does in some of his films. And because I am a musician and paid attention to a lot of music news, I did notice that there's a Teenage Engineering OB4 speaker system in this movie, and it's in a lot of scenes in the movie, which is, I'll put a picture up here. It's basically a speaker system that has some fancy stuff going on. That's a side topic for another day. The story here it's pretty basic, because it's about these boosters stealing from the rich billionaire's corporation and her fighting back. So there is a lot of commentary around just capitalism through the lens of fashion. And there's a lot of similar themes that underlie with that anti-capitalist approach that dabble across a number of the subplots in this film, and they all accumulate into, I guess, one finale that does make sense. But there is a lot going on in this movie, and that's probably one of the weaker points of it, is that there's a lot of characters. A lot of them don't really have a story arc. For the most part, Keke Palmer's character Corvette kind of has a little bit of a understanding of friendship and what it means to actually be alone and not alone. So there's some stuff there about capitalism making people lonely that's tackled a little bit. It's not super clear, and I could probably be completely wrong about that. But the characters, there's just way too many of them. Even though they're a lot of fun to watch, it is kind of a weak point. You don't really get to know them. Even the leads in the movie are pretty just straightforward, and what you see is what you get. There's not a lot of nuance around the character building. Like Lakeith Stanfield's character is in here. I felt he was going to play a different type of role based on the trailer, but what you get here is like completely out of the ballpark. This is from I don't know where they got this from, but his character is interesting, even though very kind of useless and redundant. And I'll talk about that in spoilers, because it's a little out there. So if you're into, I don't know, quirky, weird stuff that's very anti-capitalist, you want to see a director who is showing that creative spirit of filmmaking and bringing up a bunch of different wacky ideas and putting them into this film that is highly entertaining to watch, even though it does have some issues. I highly recommend checking out I Love Boosters. I'd give it 3 stars. All right, thanks for sticking around. If you're still here, sometimes it depends on the movie and how interested I am in talking about it. This one, I think, had a lot of interesting ideas it was trying to present, even though there are a lot of them, and it goes into some far out places. I wanted to talk about the anti-capitalist theme a little bit, along with some of the plot and characters. It had some interesting things, and I'm not really sure what Boots was trying to say, especially with one particular character. But with the theming, it is a very anti-capitalist movie. There's some subplots around workers who are not getting all the money they owe. They're get very short breaks. They're like 30-second breaks. There's a little funny gag in the movie where Will Poulter's character is timing a couple of the employees as they run to lunch and back. And then there's also, on top of that, these workers wanting to unionize, and basically it's a call for a general strike. And that's really, when it comes down to capitalism, the only way there's going to be real noticeable change around this kind of system that we have that is just grinding people to the ground is for everybody just to up one day and just not work anymore until the corporations realize that they're not the ones with the real power. It is the workers who have the real power. So there's a lot of stuff around the general strike discussions that have been going around for years, especially with all these billionaires running everything. There's also this component of human rights, which, workers' rights, human rights, kind of all in the same thing. But there's a subplot with factory workers in China who build all the clothes and some of the conditions they have to work in, and they want to go on strike as well, where they want more wages, less hours, a lot of typical stuff that comes with those workers' rights and this kind of change of how we see work and what we do with our lives. And so all these stories do kind of boil up into that one anti-capitalist thing. And the finale is basically all these groups coming together at this fashion show, and then Corvette and her crew doing some things with a particular device that I'll talk about in a minute to expedite the general strike that it comes about in the movie. That reason a lot of people don't want to do a general strike is people have bills to pay, they have kids to feed, they need a roof over their heads. And so Keke Palmer's character, Corvette, throughout the film sees this giant ball of, it's like a ATM machines with bills and dollars that's rolling and chasing after her in a few scenes. And at the end of it, it actually shrinks to nothing that she just picks up. I think it's just kind of that thing in the back of your head was like, yeah, everybody would love to do a general strike, but there's this nagging thing of like, I got to pay the bills and do all these things. And like, are the big corporations actually going to listen to us? I think they would if everybody just upped and walked out of work one day. But that also goes into some of the characters. So Lakeith Stanfield in this movie, he kind of plays this model character that Keke Palmer comes across at the beginning, who is in this nightclub. But you actually find out that he's an actual demon and that he sucks human souls out through fellatio in this really crazy scene in the film that's just way out there. And you're like, wait, is this just an allegory for something? And then no, he's an actual demon who sucks souls. And he tells her this later in the movie. And the only way to break the spell is for him to have a human truly fall in love with them. They don't actually get together. And outside of this having some kind of crazy thing happen in the movie and him letting them into this fashion show, his character was completely useless. I don't know why they had him in here other than maybe Boots Riley likes Lakeith Stanfield, who was a great actor, but his character didn't really do anything in this movie except be a little bit odd and glare at Keke Palmer in some weird scenes that if they cut that out, all his stuff out, it would have been a tighter film, because there's already a lot going on with all the other subplots. And then there's the big thing with the Chinese factory where I guess they're cousins. One of them decides to actually come to the US and start stealing from the factory owner. But they do this in a weird way because the factory is also developing this technology that looks like a sphere type thing that also looks like a dryer door of some kind, but it's a teleportation machine. So the two factory workers stealing from the stores in the US, and they're teleporting all the goods to a warehouse in China. And Keke Palmer's crew comes across this person in the cameras. It's like, wait, how the hell is she stealing the clothes so fast? Because she's literally sucking them off the racks. They eventually catch up to her. I guess they kind of kidnap her, but then she lets them know what's going on, and they let her know that, hey, we're on the same team. We want to get back at Demi Moore's character and take down this billionaire. And so they team up. They're using this teleportation machine to just steal the clothes really quick from all these stores. But then they realize there's other buttons on it that they accidentally hit. One of them kind of does a deconstruction of materials, kind of. And then one of them, they have this like long thing about some scientific-y stuff that's going on and how it can reinterpret what something is. It's so out there and super crazy. I really enjoyed that part. They actually used it a lot there's this chase scene at the end of the movie where they actually use the teleportation, where Keke Palmer is jumping between the Bay Area and China and doing some kind of unique things with teleporting around the world to get away from what are essentially these other people who decided to medically remove their skin. And these are skin suits that are going to be sold as fashion. And this comes up earlier in the movie when Keke Palmer overhears Demi Moore's character saying something about these $100,000 suits. Well, they eventually find out that it's actually like human skin that you could take off and put on. And this is where some of the stop motion stuff comes into play as they're animating these humans with no skin. I thought it was so ludicrous, but it was really funny in how some of these characters were portrayed. One of them is like Don Cheadle's character. There's also Jason Ritter's in here, and a number of other people that it's a lot of fun to watch with this particular chase scene and how it was shot, because it's just, you're like, where the hell did this come from? The whole third act in this movie is just nuts. There's, people being chased by these skinless people in this slow-mo animated thing. We got Keke Palmer teleporting between China and the Bay Area, trying to escape these people without their skin on. And there's a whole thing where they actually use the machine to expedite the general strike that happens at the end of the film. Definitely crazy, definitely out there, definitely wacky. So I highly recommend checking out I Love Boosters. And until next time.